Good afternoon. This is the January 7th, 2019 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. I'm David Ballard. First item is the roll call. Tracy Hopkins.
Here.
Ryan Lancaster.
Here for a little while.
Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Ballard is here. Tricia Matthews.
Here.
Ryan Leslie.
Here in the nick of time.
Ryan Hall.
Here.
David McKinney.
Here.
Charlene Pedersen is absent. Justin Price. Absent. Luke Kavanaugh. Absent. Sean Martin. Absent. Tony Tisdale. Absent. Brian Parker.
Here.
Good afternoon, sir. Miranda Carson. We'll keep an eye out for these individuals. Second item is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I suggest that we move 6F up to 6A position so that the Commissioner Lancaster can be present for the vote.
Would you adopt that even higher?
Well,
It may be as the first item, or
sure, why don't we, yeah.
I mean, we could do that after item 3, because I get it, his schedule is such that he would like to still participate in the vote.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion to move 6F up to between items 3 and 4 currently.
I'll second that.
Have a second. Take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and I have a second question. At our last commission meeting, we had tabled a discussion on truck routes, and my question is, if we table something, does that item need to go under old business automatically, or does it only come back when we want to talk about it? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just asking the question.
My recollection is that that could be revisited at a later date. I suppose that we could put that back in future meeting topics, or simply to another time and place from whatever source. Someone says, will you reconsider it? Bring it up at that time. By shelving it, we didn't, I don't think we said we'd never consider it again.
Okay, that's fine.
Any better recollection or any manner of stating that otherwise than what I have done? Okay, so I'm thinking if that's in the back of your mind, Mr. Lewis, 6 months from now, if you want to bring it up, it's out there.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so adoption of the agenda, we're done. Roll call is done. I note that Tony Tisdale has arrived. Approval of minutes from the December 3rd, 2018 meeting. You had an opportunity to review and see if we need to make any additions or deletions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
I have a motion to adopt the December 3, 2018 minutes as drafted. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. McKinney. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Hood, I will sign those minutes. Okay, so with the modified judgment, we'll take up item 6F, election of 2019 officers. Do we have nominations from the floor?
I nominate Stephen Lewis,
Or,
Chairman.
all right,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to state that I would be willing to let someone else do that.
Well, so far we have one name.
Mr. Chairman, do
Mr. Lancaster?
you wish to remain chairman of the commission?
I would serve one more year, but if that is the choice, but likewise, I'm willing to hand the baton to a successor.
I certainly understand that, having.
But
sat
I'm
in that
okay,
chair.
comfortable, you know, if it's another year, then I'm okay.
In that case, I'd like to nominate Dave Ballard as chairman.
Okay,
Second that.
all right. So we have two nominations for chairman, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ballard. We also would need a vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be curious if Brian Leslie would be interested in either of those positions.
Mr. Leslie would not.
That's a little stronger statement than I.
Okay,
And, Mr. Chairman, I also think that no matter what, I think in any case, the vote for chairman ought to take place first, and then we decide on vice chairman after that.
okay. Mr. Baird, are we within our, okay, so we can. All right, so we have two nominations for chairman, Steve Lewis and David Ballard. Shall I just call for a vote? All in favor of Mr. Lewis? Okay, 0.
Nominated him.
All in favor of Ballard?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, thank you. I appreciate.
Thank you for your support.
Yes, you're welcome, Commissioner Lewis. I want you to know what restraint that took.
Wow.
All right. I will hook the wagon back up and continue to shepherd this group.
Need it.
And thank you for your willingness to do so, Commissioner Ballard.
I enjoy this. Or I enjoy the commission, not that I'm sitting in this chair, but I enjoy participating in the commission. Okay, so now we get down to vice chair. We have a nomination for a vice chair. Mr. Lewis, would you remain in that position if you were so designated?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one nomination for vice chair. Is there a second? Mr. Leslie has declined, or from our previous conversation?
I
or
would
do you want to
second Mr. Lewis.
Okay, so I take it that your earlier comment would be repeated. All right?
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a comment first and then ask if somebody would be interested in being nominated.
Well, let's ask, we have, within the last year, I think you put it, Mr. Lancaster, the other day in the email, we have some original members and then we have some new members. So do we leave it out for the most, within the last year, 2 new members, if they have any desire to serve as vice chairman?
Volunteers, you mean? Yeah.
Volunteers? Mr. McKinney?
I'd be willing if Mr. Lewis isn't interested.
Okay. And I said new members, Tricia Matthews, you're also in that subset or set. Do you have any desire to serve as vice chairman?
Well, I'm still way too new to this.
Okay, all right,
Thank you.
all right. And Mr. Leslie, going once, going twice, you just decline, I take it. All right. So we have a slate of Stephen Lewis and Mr. McKinney. Call for the vote. All in favor of Mr. Lewis? I will vote for him. You have one. Mr. McKinney?
Aye.
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 Okay, Mr. McKinney? You are the vice chairman.
We got your back, Steve.
Thanks, man.
Okay,
I have some candy here for you.
so that
May I make a
there's only
comment?
two officers,
I-
chairman and vice chairman.
I know, but may I make a comment on our election
Yes,
results?
you may.
So, I like the idea of us grooming the vice chairman to become chairman, especially if you'll only run, or, yeah, if you will not run again after next year. So, Commissioner McKinney, we'll have high expectations for you next year. You can anticipate a nomination next year, so.
All right, well, we'll
Are
continue
you gonna
to
do the grooming?
recognize Mr. Lewis as
Didn't want it.
past
He
vice
needs a
chairman.
better job. Thanks.
Yeah, vice chairman's way better.
You know, past vice chairman is still a designation that we can recognize for Mr. Lewis.
Oh,
Yes,
thank
All
you.
right.
indeed.
All right, so, going forward for 2019, chairman is Ballard, vice chairman is Mr. McKinney. Any other business to consider on the election? Comments or not? So we good to move forward then, Mr. Hood? All right, 6F. And, okay, so now we're back to item 4. Well, introduction of Commissioner Pedersen. She's not here, so we'll move to item 5, old business transportation projects. Mr. Hood.
Chair, members of the commission. So this month's update begins on page 6 of your packet. Excuse me, I don't have too terribly much to update you on. I do, even though ITD is not represented today, do want to thank them for their help on getting some of this information updated that are on state facilities. So that's on page 8. You'll see a whole bunch of bold there. That means that information is new. I didn't go through it word for word, so some of it may be kind of carryover from last month, but Mark Wasdahl did help in updating the information under the ITD projects heading. Again, that begins on page 8 and continues to page 9. As is per usual, I'm not going to touch on all these projects, but if you have any questions, if I skip over one that you have questions about or want to talk about, I'll leave some time at the end. The other one on page 8 that I did want to call to your attention, I know we have some commissioners that live in South Meridian, but there's a project going into construction there on Victory, about a quarter mile east of Locust Grove. That will include some road closures. There was to be local access available. But there's some bridge work going to be happening here in the over the next few months on that Victory Bridge projects. I did project. Link to the project website there if you want any more information on that project.
Caleb, I have a question on that. That is not the Reidenbach Canal, that is a lateral, is how I understand that they're putting a bridge over? Is that correct, or is that not the Reidenbach Canal that I'm thinking of that goes through there?
Mr. Chair, we can look at that. I haven't actually looked at what the
It says a
facility
quarter
names.
mile east of Locust Grove.
East of Locust Grove, correct.
I was just trying to picture that in my mind exactly where that's at, but,
I can show you relatively quickly here.
yeah.
I don't know which one to look at.
Is that the main canal that's going through there? Or is that we
I
talking
think
about a
it
smaller
is.
canal?
It's excuse me, Mr. Chair, it's this facility right here. I don't see any names on the, it's 8 mile lateral there.
Okay, yep, so it's not the Reidenbach, okay. Are they gonna replace the Reidenbach Canal
I believe
eventually?
so. They're doing both of them, aren't they?
I have not heard that. I have not heard that. We do have an ACHD rep. I'm not trying to put Justin on the spot, but if he knows, I believe that the scope was just basically here over the 8 mile lateral. It doesn't go this far, as my understanding. Honestly, though, I haven't participated on this ACHD project that heavily because it's oversimplify it, but it's a bridge. The city really doesn't have much of an interest, so I haven't been tracking it that closely.
Yeah, I know they're teeing that up, obviously, for what, 2021, I think, or was when that's being reconstructed, that whole stretch.
Yeah, I think you put me on the spot. I don't remember exactly when Victory's planned to be widened, but that will only be a 3-lane facility too. When it, that's all that Victory's really ever planned to be is 3 lanes wide. So yeah, this is the current bridge that's going into construction.
Yeah.
we can look at that project website again a little bit more. There's not a whole lot of more detail, just to be honest with you, but there's contact information. So if you wanted to talk, send an email to the project manager there, or have any other questions, or I can do a little more research too. But,
That's good enough.
and then again, I'll let you read kind of the ITD updates for yourself there, and they did also include hyperlinks to those project websites. And the last one that I am prepared to talk about, although it may be more appropriate under item 6C, vehicle sharing update. On page 10 of your memo, it's under Lime, because that's how you've referred to it historically, but there are multiple providers for a vehicle sharing program in Meridian. So, Mr. Chair, I just provided a brief update there, but it is probably more appropriate for me to just address that in a couple of agenda items there, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
But either way.
Very good. For the record, we'll note that Mr. Martin arrived.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just have a couple of simple questions on this update. Several of the projects, especially those that are coming up the soonest, state that they're on the 90-day bid list or something like that. Although a couple of them, I think they've had that designation for a while. Can you give us an update of when, are some of these close to being bid, or are we still 60 to 90 days away from it?
So I try to update those pretty well. I know we had December for some of these 2019 projects, but really look for the 19 projects. Linda Road, for example, on page 7. And there is a little bit of lag. It may be on the 90-day bid list, but I don't know if they've had those bid openings and if a contractor's been selected or not. I do generally try to look at the ACHD agendas each week. They haven't had any commission meetings. This Wednesday will be their first one in 3 or 4 weeks just due to the holidays. So I don't think any of those have been awarded recently. But I do try to update those and mention contractors. But really, you're looking for the 2019 projects. And again, for us, that's generally the 2 Linda Road projects, Ustick to McMillan and Cayuse Creek to Chinden. I don't know if Sean or maybe Justin know if those have been awarded, and that slipped by me on an agenda. I did look at putting this together. I did look at the update that ACHD staff puts together, and I don't recall any updates, though. Seems like there were a couple of them that were on the November bid list that carried forward to the December 90-day bid list. If there's any others that are 2019 projects, though.
That's fine. Just wanted
Locust
to.
Grove Victory to Overland, I guess, is a. No, it's construction. I'm sorry. I do try to update those, but they do sneak by every once in a while, and I'll keep an eye out and let you know how those bids come in and if contractors they're awarded. But there's a little bit of a lag time there too.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Leslie.
Caleb, is it possible for us to see that draft MOU for the Lime and Bird?
Yes. So again, I was going to touch on this a little bit later on the agenda, but I did just late this afternoon, around 2:30 today, get a revised draft from our legal department. So I plan on emailing that to you all here in a little bit. And if that's okay for now, I'll just
Absolutely.
kind of leave that there, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's on the agenda for tomorrow's workshop.
It is on the council agenda for tomorrow. Yes, and that is, public workshop begins at 3 o'clock. It's fairly early on that agenda, so if anyone's interested in participating in that. But yeah, it is on tomorrow afternoon's council workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
If I may, sorry, I was just looking at our website as Caleb was talking here. Linda Road, Ustick to Chinden is currently out to bid, with bids scheduled to open on January 9th. So that would be Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. Any other comments, questions, for Mr. Hood on his project list? Mr. Hood, I had one question. There was some discussion about the and the name is escaping me, but the modified intersection, the high-capacity intersection, the design of that high-capacity, I think at what, Locust Grove or one of the crossroads on Shinden? And there was a recent meeting about that. Are there changes in how that's to be designed or utilized?
Mr. Chair, I believe you're probably talking about a continuous flow intersection.
Continuous flow,
And there are
yes.
some partial CFIs that are also being designed. So there's 3 CFIs, and some of them are partials where not all 4 legs have the CFI configuration. The full CFI is at Linder, so that's your full-blown
Okay,
CFI. And then there's a modified or partial CFI at Meridian Road. And I don't know if you're referring to this or not, but Eagle Road got some discussion. I'm not tracking that as closely just because that's in Boise Eagle. But I have been at some of those meetings where that's been talked about. And the last I heard, they were going to look at that some more. But as far as I know, that's still a partial CFI as well. And Locust Grove is going in, it's in design right now, actually. But yeah. That's not a CFI, I don't believe. So I think it's Meridian Road with the partial, and then Eagle and Linder would be your full CFIs, the last that I've heard.
okay. Thank you, I appreciate that. 5A, any further comments, conversation on 5A? I'll close 5A. New business. Sergeant Arnold is not present, so we will not have a status report. Item 6B, ACHD, roadways to bikeways path. Justin Lucas. Mr. Lucas, welcome back.
Thank you.
When was the last time you were here?
I attend regularly.
Well,
it seems like.
Well, yes, but, excuse me, yes you do, but we haven't brought you to the podium in maybe a couple, 3-4 months.
Chairman Ballard, it has been a little while since I've had a chance to present, and I'm excited to do so today.
Okay.
My name is Justin Lucas. I represent the Ada County Highway District. Our business address is 3775 Adams Street in Garden City, Idaho, for the record. Today I was asked to update the commission on ACHD's bicycle program and our recently adopted, relatively recently, look at that, it's been almost a year now since we adopted our roadways to bikeways plan addendum. We adopted our original bicycle master plan back in 2009, and we took a lot of steps forward with that document as an agency for Ada County, including obviously the city of Meridian. We were really excited to update that plan, and we did so over about a 2-year period, and then finalizing with the adoption in 2018. And we were pretty specific in what we wanted to look at with this addendum. One of the things, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but one of the things we heard from the public, from our city partners, was that ACHD should focus more on low-stress bike routes. You may wonder what that means. The way it's defined in our plan is that a low-stress bike route is a bikeway or an area for cyclists to operate that isn't on a busy street. Back in 2009, the best practice back then kind of nationally was, adding bike lanes onto all facilities, which ACHD has done. But what we have found, and this is what's been found nationally, is that bike lanes, like a 5-foot bike lane on an arterial street, like Ustick, for example, they don't get that much use. And all of you, some of you actually, may feel really comfortable in that environment. Most people don't. They just don't feel that comfortable riding in a bike lane with traffic and on a road that has, let's say, a 35 or a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. So we're not abandoning those facilities. We're not going to move away from that. We believe that providing bike facilities on all of ACHD's roadways is important. But what we are doing is focusing on a network that tries to avoid those higher stress routes, that's what we call them, and try to build a network based on lower stress routes so that people of all ages and abilities have access to different spots within the county, specifically within the city of Meridian. So that's one of the main focuses of this effort, and that's kind of what I wanted to go into today. And you have I probably should use the page. I'll do this. What I've done here is I have the plan up in front of you. I'm obviously not going to read all this. One of the things we went through the goals and objectives. We talked about how we're doing. We looked at our different things. A big thing we did was we came up with this status report. It's not filled in the plan here. This is a template, and it's part of our annual report that we're going to start reporting on funding, network build-out of the different levels. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, and Level 1 is considered the low-stress bikeways, as you can see there. Access, there's some graphics and some statistics we're going to track. Safety is a huge part of our bike program. Maintenance, outreach efforts, and then local planning. So this was kind of a snapshot we came up with to be able on a yearly basis to better describe how we're doing in our bike program. The other thing I wanted to focus on was this facility definitions. I mentioned the low-stress bikeways. Those are the Level 1s. We also developed these kind of different levels, 1, 2, and 3. And so what we're trying to do is tie the type of bikeway. I want to get to this chart, which is my favorite chart in the document. We're trying to tie the type of bikeway to the characteristics of the street. And so as you can see on your on this axis, you have speed. And on this axis, you have volume of traffic. And so, as you can see, a low volume, low speed roadway qualifies as a low stress roadway because that's where we imagine that cyclists would feel most comfortable, is on streets where there's not that many cars, and if there are cars, they're going at a low speed, much like the residential streets in the neighborhoods that many of you probably live in. So when we were doing our analysis for this plan, we really focused on those Level 1 facilities, those low-stress facilities. Moving up the chain a little bit, you can see Level 2. This is where you have conventional bike lanes, shoulder bike lanes on some of our rural routes, and what we call buffered bike lanes, which are bike lanes that are traditional, but they have a wider buffer, not just a single 6-inch white stripe, but let's say a 1-foot or a 2-foot striped buffer between the vehicle travel lane and the bike lane. That's something we have been working to implement. I think we have that, and Sean can probably jump in here, but we've implemented buffered bike lanes in a few locations across the county. And you can see there the traffic volumes, you kind of climb up to that kind of 6, 7, 8,000 vehicles per day range, and the speeds maybe a little higher, kind of 25 plus, 20, 30, 35. So some of our minor arterial roads fall probably within this range. And you have a lot of collectors that would fall within this range of, maybe a standard bike lane on a collector is sufficient and works really well. Then you kind of climb up to the Level 3, and these are what we consider the really protected facilities. This is when you get the volumes up above 10, 15,000, 20,000 vehicles per day. This is the busier streets that you're familiar with out there. And the speeds are up there in that range of, 40, 50 plus. ACHD doesn't have a lot of 50-mile-per-hour roadways, but we do have a lot of 35 and 40-mile-per-hour roadways and quite a few 45s. And these you get potentially that buffered bike lane depending on the situation. Protected bike lanes, which is a facility treatment where you have an actual physical barrier between the bike lane and the travel way. That barrier could be in kind of a simple implementation. It might be like a plastic candle or something like that. Maybe in another more aggressive implementation, it's an actual curb or some type of other physical barrier. Raised bike lanes, which we're going to do the first ones on Cloverdale Road with our emergency project over the bridge there. So the new bridge on Cloverdale over the freeway will actually have 10-foot I think it's 10 or 12-foot pathways on either side. But in ACHD's facilities leading up to that bridge, we're going to be doing raised bike lanes, which are kind of a tiered approach where you have the travel way, you step up a little bit onto a concrete bike facility, and then you step up a little bit more with a buffer space to the pedestrian facility. So it basically takes the cycle out of the roadway. So we're excited about that implementation and see how that works out there. So this matrix is really, we're trying to get this matrix. Every bikeway we do, every project we do, we'll use this matrix as a guide on what types of facilities we're going to be using. And this is a big step forward for the Highway District, and we're really excited about this. We're not necessarily going to do, we can't do this on projects already underway. Some corridors, they may have qualified under this matrix for something higher, but we're just too far along on the corridor to do anything now. A good example of that would be 10 Mile. 10 Mile we've built with conventional bike lanes basically from the freeway all the way to Ustick Road. And on those last couple miles, we're not going to deviate from that. We're going to continue with a conventional bike lane on 10 Mile Road because those projects are already almost finished with design and going into construction. So, and there's other examples of that out there.
Can I ask you a question about
sure.
this, Justin? So, I'm wondering how this will be used if you use the, you know, it looks to me like you'll use the prevailing vehicular traffic, motor vehicle traffic, to determine what kind of bicycle facility you'll use. Is this intended to be used the other direction? And I ask that with this context. You know, we often have Sergeant Arnold on our agenda, and he'll come and he'll ask for speed studies at times, and usually he's asking for something higher, right? He's saying we can't enforce it at this speed. And so I ask my question to say, is this, you know, going to constrain speed studies by, you know, can Sergeant Arnold come here and ask for a speed study and we ask ACHD for a speed study? And you come back with the answer, we can't do that because we built this bicycle facility for this box, right? Okay.
About commissioners. It's a good question. Certainly it's not the intent of this matrix to restrict the analysis or activity related to a speed study. What we would hope, obviously, with any project or study is that we're taking in the context of the roadway. That if there's a roadway with a lot of bicycle generators and attractors, obviously that should play into the decision related to the bicycle facility and some of the other design characteristics of that roadway. So that's not the intent of this is to inform those project decisions and to help us evaluate the right facility treatment. As you can see, there's options. You know, each of these different categories, you have quite a few options you can choose, and depending on the context of the roadway, that's where the right option would be selected through the project design process.
Thank you.
So just moving on to a few other spots, we worked quite a bit on our bicycle project prioritization and basically tied it back to this facility level that I was just discussing. We also have various other characteristics, distance to school, distance to civic and transit facilities, demographic data, and other things like that. These are things we've always used to prioritize projects, but we're integrating them directly into our bicycle planning and programming. And then what we did is we took the overall network in Ada County and we applied the level 1, level 2, or level 3 facility type to the different roadways. So I'll scroll through some of these maps. These are available on our website. They may be a little hard to see here, but you can see the different colors. The level 1s are in yellows, the level 2s are in purple, and the level 3s are in blue. And you can see how we're planning to implement these different facilities across the county. This is a good shot of kind of north and central Meridian. And I'll kind of highlight one of the things we really worked hard on was to integrate the level 1 facilities with Meridian's pathway network, because a lot of people feel most comfortable riding on a facility that has nothing to do with the road, that's a pathway. And so, but sometimes those pathways, almost all of them at some point, interface with a road, and you have to cross the road. And so one of the things we're really working hard to do is highlight those areas where a crossing is necessary and come up with a facility treatment, even if it's just for a small portion of that roadway that integrates well with that pathway network. And so that's something we worked pretty hard on in this update. And you can also see that there's a lot of these yellow lines and pathway or bikeways running through the major neighborhoods within Meridian, because that's where we anticipate the most use on those kind of lower stress facilities. So we went across the county. There's parts of Boise, and South Meridian would be represented here. You can see out in South Meridian, in the more rural parts of our county, we're quite a ways away from bike facilities on some of these. These are just going to be operating as rural roads for quite a while. But we are working to get those low-stress facilities in those areas where the neighborhoods have kind of been built out. And let's just go through some of these. So that's kind of my summary for today. Hopefully, I can certainly take any other questions you might have or concerns. We're actively trying to implement these plans. We do have, coming up here, I don't have it off the top of my head, I should, but we do have a bikeway planned for one of the key bikeways in North Meridian, kind of Central Meridian. It goes along the 8th Street in Meridian from kind of where the middle school is, and you can connect up through where the city built a bridge over the canal there, connecting into the Bud Porter pathway system, and then connecting that bikeway up kind of through North Meridian to the other parks and other civic facilities there. So we'll be bringing a concept forward to the city. I think it's in a few years, and would obviously like to work with the Transportation Commission on and the Parks Commission on how that bikeway is developed and designed and constructed. Some of the things with a bikeway, it might just be signs, additional pavement markings. On a bikeway we recently completed in Boise, we actually added some bulb outs and a few other physical characteristics. So it just depends on each roadway and what's appropriate for that roadway. So with that, I can certainly stand for any questions or take any comments you might have.
Mr. Leslie?
No, I don't have any.
Okay.
I helped design the document, so I know all about it.
Okay. I was giving you first crack because we know your advocacy of the bikeways. Other questions or comments, discussions for Mr. Lucas? Mr. Lucas, I have one question. So several years ago, if I heard this correctly, it was like 5% of the population will ride bikes to and from, and I know it's maybe kind of seasonal. With this emphasis of building bike lanes over the last several years, do you have is there a more current number of who is using the bikeways and for what purpose?
Mr. Chairman, excellent question. The U.S. Census Bureau actually does statistics on bicycle ridership, mostly related to bicycle commuters, those who choose to ride a bicycle to work. Okay. Those numbers it depends on where you are in the Treasure Valley. The city of Boise actually has a higher percentage of people who choose to ride a bike to work than, let's say, the city of Meridian. And those numbers, we'll get an update on those numbers when they go through the 2020 census here in about a year. And so we're excited to see what those numbers are and what they show. The commission has shown a lot of interest in bike facilities. And one of the reasons why we're focused on this low-stress network is because, to be honest, I don't think the infrastructure that we've put in on the arterial network, of those 5-foot bike lanes, has had the impact that people thought it might when it comes to ridership, for the reasons we discussed today. It's just riding in those types of facilities, it takes a certain type of rider who feels really comfortable out there in traffic. And there are many of those, but it's certainly not the vast majority of the population. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but.
Well, we'll hold 5% till I hear otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know if the commuter numbers are that high, to be honest with you. I think they're closer to probably 2 or 3% is those who choose to ride a bike to work on a regular basis, which is actually relatively high. The best places in our best is a judgment call, but the most ridership in the United States you see in a place like Davis, California has quite a bit of ridership of bicycles for those who choose to ride to work. Portland, and even them, they're 8 to 10%. Is about the maximum you'll see in the United States. Some other countries experience different, much higher percentages depending on the type of development pattern they have over the years. So,
okay. And I know that chart was interesting, but in designing a road, and I suppose it depends upon what type of bike lane you're putting there, what's the percentage of the cost to design and build the road to incorporate a bike lane?
That's a real good question, and we've looked at that recently as we were deciding what to do on the Cloverdale project. And a 5-foot bike lane, and there's costs that go back and forth here. A couple $100,000 probably is a good number for a 5-foot bike lane on a roadway, like an arterial roadway for, let's say, a mile. That's the number we've used historically. That might be, maybe it's a little more than that now. I haven't looked at that number recently. But that's the pure construction cost. Because if you throw in the right-of-way necessary and other things like that, some of those figures, depending on the corridor, could be higher. But ACHD historically put 4-foot shoulders on our roadway. So when we went from a 4-foot safety shoulder to a 5-foot bike lane, it really was negligible from a cost perspective. And some of these other facilities I'm talking about, the idea is if you take and remove the need to have a 5-foot bike lane within the curb, the actual pavement width is reduced, and pavement and the underlying roadway structure is one of the most expensive parts of a project. And so if you shrink down the roadway cross-section between the curbs, it does give you some more money to spend that maybe outside the curb on a bike facility. So I can't tell you exactly the difference, but we're going to monitor that as we implement these new bikeways, and we'll share that information with our commission so they're aware of the cost implications of these different facilities.
Is there, and again, with the added emphasis, maybe that's the wrong term, at least from my perception, there's been a renewed, not a renewed interest, but refocusing or concentration. Sure. Is there a correlation between safety and accidents? What's the friction between the bikes and the cars? Is it better? Is it worse? Has it helped to take the steps that you've taken?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think I could speak to that specifically today, and I don't know if Sean would have a comment on related to overall bicycle safety over the last 5 years. Yeah, I don't know if we, when you look at accident specifics, and you get down into the details of why an accident happens, a lot of those details are, may have nothing to do with the bike facility itself.
Okay.
There's other things going on with most accidents associated with distracted driving, impaired driving, et cetera, that are typical in bike and pedestrian accidents.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Anyone else have questions, comments for Mr. Lucas? Well, Mr. Lucas, I appreciate the presentation, informative, and as always, you have a standing invitation to revisit us.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Item 6B is closed. Vehicle sharing update, item 6C, Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we briefly talked about a few minutes ago, I'll provide you with an update that was requested at the last Transportation Commission meeting. I was actually just going to forward you on the ordinance that I previously referred to from the city's attorney's office that will be shared with and discussed tomorrow afternoon with the city council and city staff. As you recall, last spring, Lime representatives, Megan Colford was here and discussed with you their want to deploy shared vehicles in our community. We talked mostly about electric scooters, electric bikes, and pedal-powered bikes. Those conversations are still ongoing. They did deploy, off the top of my head, I can't remember when that was, for 3 days earlier this year. We asked them to pull back their inventory so we could work on coming up with some more rules. And then we're targeting deployment on or before March of this year. So staff is going to be, again, giving an update to our council on those parameters that staff is supportive of at this point in time, although there are some questions or some options within the ordinance. Kind of at a high level, it's taken some different shapes over the last few months, but the most current draft that I'm going to send you is ordinance-based. So I think there's 3 sections of city code that would need to be amended, but it's ordinance-based, and it really is heavily mirrored after a franchise type of a model. So the ordinance refers to franchise fees, and that's how we would treat these operators as franchisees. The draft, and again, this is where some of the options are, up to 4 franchises can operate, no more than 250, up to 250 vehicles. So a vehicle would be those 3 things I just said, although it's not, someone could, hoverboards maybe could fall under that definition too, but it would have to be, can't remember the term, but it wouldn't apply to like taxis or Uber because someone else is assisting you. This is self-assisted transportation. I can't remember the term now, but anyways, that's how we kind of differentiate these from a driver or someone hiring to move people, goods, or services. But it's ordinances with, again, kind of this undertone of franchisees. You can request up to a 20% increase in the deployment within the community if you can show the city that you're averaging at least 3 rides per day per vehicle on those. You can say, okay, you may need more because they're being used frequently enough where if you want to, you can up your inventory there. Really, that's probably the highlights of it. There are some, I imagine there'll be some discussion tomorrow on, again, the number of companies that should be allowed to operate, the fees that are actually associated with this. It's kind of gone different ways with per vehicle, per company. The city of Boise has, basically they require a deposit, and then they draw on that deposit every time they become a public nuisance, and their police officers actually have to impound them or otherwise move them. They can draw on this deposit that the company's had. We've talked about a per ride fee of like 10 cents. So there are some options that we'll probably imagine get some discussion tomorrow at council. It will be licensed through the city clerk's office. It's annually renewable through this process, and it's at least right now it's sort of a first come first serve. Although we're looking at first to market, kind of giving them some auto renew if they're still interested. So it's not have to be here January 1st, the first one in line to get those credits or whatever the maximum. But I think that's kind of the highlights at this point. Again, I'll share this with you all. You can look at it. Let me know if you'd like to follow up on this, either under old business or new business or whatever, next month probably. I imagine things will go fairly rapidly. My understanding from Emily Kane in legal is within 30 days of the introduction of this is when it could become effective. I don't think that probably tomorrow is when the clock will start, but I imagine somewhere between 45 and 60 days anyways, this will probably happen. So that's kind of the time frame we're on. So again, next month, I think we could probably provide a pretty solid update, and then be ready for redeployment sometime. Yeah, by March 1, I would think certainly.
Comments for, excuse me, questions for Mr. Hood?
Mr. Chairman.
Hopkins?
Caleb, so that's 4 vendors with a maximum of 250 starting off each, so we're talking 1,000 whatever's running around?
No, so the citywide total is 750.
Oh, okay.
So there's 2 companies we're currently working with pretty actively. We've heard there's a third that may be interested, but this would allow up to 2 more to kind of come to market, sharing or again, if there's 3. Yeah, that's where it's capped at right now. And again, I think that'll be something that'll be discussed. And it does have a minimum to it. You have to deploy no fewer than 100 to start.
Okay. And an aggregate of 750.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, Caleb.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Leslie?
Caleb, was there any discussion about where they can be parked and where they can be ridden? That seems to be the big elephant in the room.
Yeah, certainly, that's a big part of aside from getting the definitions and clarifying that. I should have done that. Let me skip to that part. Essentially, it's based on speed limit and what facilities exist on that roadway. It's kind of how the city ordinance reads. Let me find that.
That would not be good, Mr. Leslie.
Oh, the other thing I should point out, just as I'm looking for that, because it caught my eye as well, the Parks Commission had some concerns with the 15-mile-per-hour speed that these can go in parks, and they had some complaints over that short time frame that they were in our community about people zipping by on paths within the parks and stuff. So we do have in here what they call geofencing, where it would slow these down to a maximum of 8 miles per hour within city parks. And then in certain areas within certain parks, for example, splash pads and tot lot areas, they basically cut them down to like 1 mile an hour, so you essentially can't ride them. They still will move, but you can't speed by, or bunny hops or whatever through a splash pad or these types of things. So there's kind of this 50 miles an hour everywhere, 8 miles in parks, and then within certain designated areas within the parks, the governor really kicks in, and you can't really go. Essentially, can't ride them. You have pretty good balance. Parking. So part of that is it says you can't park these in a manner or location that reduces the width of the usable area of a public sidewalk or pathway to less than 5 feet. So you've got to have a clear zone. You can't place it in the middle of a sidewalk. It's got to be back to leave that 5-foot clear space so pedestrians can walk by. Place it on a block without sidewalks. Impedes ADA accommodations. Can't block fire hydrants, other public safety infrastructure. Not in public on-street parking spaces for vehicles, except where designated. On private property without permission or on a driveway. So that's talking about parking. Let's see. Okay. So and this would be in Title VII, which is under motor vehicles and traffic. Riders of e-bikes or e-scooters and such terms shall comply with the following. Riders shall ride in bike lanes when available. If no bike lane is available, on streets which have a speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less, riders shall ride in the street. On streets which have a speed limit of 25 miles per hour or more, riders may ride on the adjacent sidewalk. On streets which have a speed limit of greater than 45 miles per hour or more, riders shall ride only on the adjacent sidewalk and shall not ride in the street. So that's how, and this says riders riding on a sidewalk must maintain a distance of 2 feet from all pedestrians, not carry any passengers. Yeah, the part about the parks. So 25 miles an hour or less, right on the street. 25 hours or more, right on the sidewalk where it exists. And 45 miles per hour, right only on the adjacent sidewalk and not right in the street.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Caleb.
Excuse me.
I didn't have anything else, thank you.
Okay. I can take Mr. Lewis.
I'll reserve my comments for tomorrow.
You'll yield the floor to Mr. Lewis.
I will.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify, and again, sorry. So tomorrow is a workshop. It's not a public hearing. There will be a public hearing on this. This is just to get some more direction from council. Not that you couldn't come, raise your hand. I imagine the mayor would probably call on anybody that wants to talk about this, but I just do want to clarify, not just for you, but others that may be watching this. It isn't a public hearing. It is more in the workshop format where we're trying to get some direction from council on what should we put out to the public to testify on. But certainly you're welcome to come, and if you want to be part of making this or have comments at this point, again, you'll probably be called on, but it's not, you don't get 3 minutes necessarily. There is some discretion there from the chair to the mayor to call on anyone in the audience for that matter, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Just a quick question, Mr. Hood, on those speed thresholds and when you can ride the scooters in the street or have a choice or only on the sidewalk. How do those thresholds compare to city code on pedal bikes? Are they the same or different?
Good question, Mr. Lewis. I don't know. I didn't write this, and I remember having some discussion and even talking. Most of the conversations I were a part of were differentiating between, what if I go to Walmart and buy my kid a scooter? Does this apply to him too, or is this only where it's a shared scooter where they rented it? And if so, what's the difference? At that point, who can tell? Why does it matter? But honestly, and I don't know if Mr. Baird has this memorized or not, and I'm not trying to put him on the spot. I know he wasn't overly actively involved in developing this. I don't recall what our ordinances, if they're silent on where you can ride bicycles or not. So I don't know. I can look that up here if there's some downtime and come up with an answer, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Mr. Hood, so there's an MOU to be discussed. Are the ordinances to be discussed, or are they in place?
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, to clarify, these are draft ordinances, but they aren't ready for public testimony on them yet. They're still in draft form, so we're trying to get that original direction from council. Does this feel about right? Where we're ready to send it out to the public for their comment and testimony on it first. So trying to get the council some general direction on how ordinances should read. There is not an MOU. We're kind of removing that model of that's what we have currently with Lime as an MOU. And there are some terms within that MOU that made it into the draft ordinance. But we're going to go with a franchise fee licensure type of a program through the clerk. And so, and that's essentially just going to say comply with city code. Okay. So it's ordinance based.
Very good. Any other comments, questions for Mr. Hood? Okay, that brings a close to item 6C. 6D, 2018 end-of-year report. Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, I can certainly take it. My name's on there, but I did kind of co-draft the first draft of the your 2018 report that will be given to the mayor and council sometime probably in February, although I haven't heard from the clerk on exactly when, and we'll coordinate that with, I assume, the chair, although you guys let Stephen off pretty easy earlier, so maybe as the outgoing vice chair, he should have to present this report to the council. I don't know, just saying. But I did share that draft with you all. I didn't hear anything back. The chair and vice chair kind of early in the process had some tweaks, and I incorporated those into what you have in your packet now. But if there aren't any other changes, I would request that you adopt that report, and then stay tuned as we coordinate a date for someone to come and verbally kind of present that report to the mayor and council here in the next couple of months.
Okay. Well, Mr. Lewis should keep in mind that over the last several years, it's been flexible who came out of the bullpen to pinch hit for the designated chairman at that time. So he still may be called on at the last minute. With respect to the language of the proposed report, if you've had a chance to review it, if you would like to make any additions or supplement it, now is the time to hear those requests. Hearing none, Mr. Hood had called for a resolution to adopt it as written. Is there a motion to adopt it as written?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the a resolution to adopt it. Is there a second?
Second.
And we have 2 seconds. Mr. Lewis and Mr. McKinney, kind of a tie. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Hood will final that, and let us know when we can present that then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6D, and I would say I appreciate you taking the task to keep these notes and prepare it. Job well done, sir. Item 6E, staff communications, a couple of memos from Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, if I can just kind of maybe run through one of them anyways, maybe more if you want to talk about them. But the first one there, just want to put you on notice that, next month we'll really start to get into programming and prioritization. So I will probably send you this email from Mr. Head, came in just as I was putting the finishing touches on this month's packet. So I didn't have time to really integrate this into today's meeting. I would have loved to probably done some of this today. We're leaving a little bit of time on the table, it looks like, but in February, March, hopefully we can even just do it in February, because by March 15th, we have to have that back to ACHD. So what I'm going to do after I send you the vehicle sharing draft ordinance, I'm going to also just send you our list from last year, and that way that gives you a pretty good base. And again, I don't know what's changed in 12 months. Certainly some things have changed, but you start to think about how should we tweak that list. I'll probably also send you some of the requests that have come in from the community, other city staff and whatnot, that just says, hey, this isn't on our list. Let's think about adding it. Primarily probably to our community programs projects list, our sidewalks, our safe routes to school, those types of things. So we can think about if that belongs on our list, and if so, how high they go. But I'm kind of asking you to do a little bit of homework, come prepared in February, so we can hopefully bang that out. If not, we do have an opportunity, in our first part of March. I can turn it right back around and go to you and then to council, and we're still okay. But it doesn't allow. I put council kind of under the gun with that March 15th deadline. If you have to talk about it in March, they've pretty much got to act at their meeting, and historically they've wanted a meeting or two to kind of chew on it. So again, my request would be to come prepared to that February meeting. Let's come to some consensus, hopefully. And again, if not, no big deal. I'm not going to go through it, but you also have something in here February just to kind of keep us on track there. Mr. Chair, you won't be green, so you kind of know how to do it. But we're going to have some neighbors that are also going to be here that want to talk about Paramount parking and continue that discussion that we've had. So I'll just kind of ask you to sort of monitor the clock a little bit there and keep us moving forward so we can tackle. Those are 2 fairly big items that we'll have at the February meeting. It's going to be a room full of people, but we'll have some people that certainly have some opinions about the high school parking in their subdivision there, Northwest Meridian. So,
Ms. Hood, along those lines, and I've given some thought about that over the last several months, and Mr. Baird helped me out. I don't know that it's within our bylaws, but am I free to establish any ground rules of people identify themselves? There's a time limit. I mean, I'm thinking something similar to city council where there's a 3-minute clock on some discussion, and there's flexibility there. And then again, that's not to cut off any suggestions from other commissioners if we want to set any ground rules. Mr. Baird, is there?
Mr. Chair, we don't have any specific rules because it's not often that we do have formal hearings like you're expecting to have. But I would look to the rules that the City Council has set up to help have an orderly meeting. People do need to identify themselves, give their address. It helps you to understand where they live, you know, from the get-go. 3-minute limit makes a lot of sense. If there's somebody who wants to speak on behalf of the HOA, they can get a little bit more time. But when you start doing that, then you've got people who say they've yielded their time, and then they come up and talk anyway. And so it's really in your discretion to say, you know, sometimes you'll hear the chair say, well, we've heard about this topic X, Y, and Z. Does anybody else have anything new to add? That kind of thing. So I'd be happy to help out during the meeting if it gets out of control.
I just.
Hopefully we'll have an officer here.
It hasn't been an issue in the past, but I thought maybe putting some sideboards on.
Yeah, you know, I can get you a copy of the script that the Planning and Zoning Commission uses, and maybe we can mark it up for this
I'd appreciate
purpose.
that.
That gives you something to sort of lay the ground rules at the get-go.
You know, short of holding someone
Yeah.
in contempt, I just have to
I'll,
be discreet.
I'll shoot that to you right away and give you some time to think about
Okay,
it.
no, I just put a little decorum there, and by and large, they're professionals, so.
And
courteous.
well, I've got the floor. Did a quick look on our code on bicycles. I think Caleb's doing the same thing. We do have a section reserved for bicycles. It's blank. The only mention of bicycle is on school or city property. You have to follow whatever signs controlling the bicycle. My recollection of state code is that it's allowed on sidewalks unless specifically prohibited. I know Boise does prohibit them in their downtown core, that type of thing, as far as human-powered bicycles. Hearing your input, I will let Emily Kane know about your question and how that relates to this differentiation that we've heard about today for the powered scooters, and sort of maybe I look forward to seeing an explanation about how they came up with those and how people are supposed to remember them. But anyway, that's all I've got.
All right, very good. It'd be interesting to see that, because several questions out there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it'll be
Mr.
really interesting to see a scooter going 15 miles an hour on a sidewalk with people on it.
Well, there's some challenges there, and then I'm thinking, okay, rules of the road. Who yields, the bike or the scooter? If you want to pass a bike in a bike lane, and maybe that's common sense, but
I don't know. Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
okay. Very good. Staff communications, item 6E.
I have something additional to add to maybe
Yes.
something currently or maybe a future topic. It's regarding Sienna Grade School, Caleb. I don't know if you can pull up a Google shot of that, Google Earth shot. It's about the crosswalks in that area. It's an in-neighborhood south. It's in Tuscany.
Mr. Hall, while he's pulling that up, is that something else to engage Mr.
Yeah.
Lancaster and the crosswalk committee?
It's possible, yeah, and then Miranda as well. But if you click that over to the satellite image of that, and there's a pathway that comes out on the northwest corner of the grade school and comes towards Capulet Way. There's a concern there with not having a crosswalk across that street right there. If you see it during grade school hours or coming and going, they do have a crossing guard there, the school does, and even though there's no official crosswalk there. I don't know what the rules are with ACHD and having crosswalks mid-intersection like that. Another example of a mid-intersection crosswalk is Barbara Morgan STEM Academy has one similar to this with a pathway coming out of the school. But it's something to consider, I guess, maybe for a future meeting topic or, for discussion, because there has been some, Yeah, you can see on the southwest side of that pathway coming out right there, there's a crosswalk. It's just painted. I'm not sure if it's ADA compliant or anything, but it looks like there's a crosswalk painted there. So something to consider, I think, for that grade school.
So, Mr. Chair, just to follow up right now, and it could be a separate future meeting topic, but I will add that to the draft. I just mentioned that as we prioritize things, this is certainly something we could add to our community programs projects list for this year. And again, how high or low that is on our list of priorities, I'll let you guys kind of hash that out over the next month, maybe two. But I'm going to add that to the bottom of the list, and then you can talk about if it belongs on it, and if so, how high you want to make it a priority. But I'll add that to the other handful of ones that I've got from other community members.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hood? Item 6E. Okay, we'll close that for today's meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Mr. Lewis,
I did have one
going
question.
backwards.
Yes, I am, I'm sorry.
All right, that's fine. We have river and mirrors.
On page 15 in the staff communications, and this is related to the parking at Paramount issue, it talks about a January 30th meeting. Can you tell us what happened at that meeting?
I cannot, because that is coming up in a couple of weeks. So it'll be just.
January. Sorry, I thought it said December 30th.
But it's a good point. Just real quick, it's going to be a bang bang. It's going to be, we're meeting with the Chief Levy, our police chief, and these neighbors, and then just a few days later, you guys are going to hear from that group kind of about what came out of that. And maybe if I can, Mr. Chair, just while I've got the floor for a second, kind of back to your point. Again, I don't know if there's going to be a room full of people. I kind of doubt it, being a weekday, middle of the day type of thing, but there'll be some people here. So I'm not too worried about having to gavel people down and it getting too drawn out. But at the same time, your point about your purview, yeah, it's certainly transportation related. You've already forwarded a recommendation to the council, and they said, yeah, we didn't really like that so much about setting up a residential parking district. I guess kind of where I'm going with this isn't speed limits, it isn't priorities, it's not one of your major charges. Not that you shouldn't listen and consider and make a well-informed recommendation to the council, but council will have a bite at this apple too. So I guess that's just to sort of say priorities to me are going to be very important. They're working with police. They're working with ACHD, quite frankly. ACHD has a plan right now to do additional restricted parking in that area, put up more of the no parking from 7:30 to 10:30 and 11:30 to 2 or whatever it is out there, and they're just wanting basically buy-in from the council. So sorry, but I just wanted to kind of put that back in perspective that, yes, consider and make a recommendation, feel fully informed, but I'll have to be part of this again at council, and those same people most likely testifying at that point in time too. So,
To that point, Mr. Hood, so this meeting on the 30th, is that invitation only, or can I invite myself?
absolutely. So that'll be in conference room A, B, I can't remember, just here inside the front doors. It's not a public meeting. No decisions are being made. This was something, just kind of, again, backtracking this. You all recommended to the mayor and council they consider an ordinance to set up a residential parking districts within the city. The council said, hold on a minute, let's think this through a little bit. And the mayor basically directed the chief of police to meet with this neighborhood to see if there's anything else, other options they could do to solve these problems about trespassing, about parking, about garbage, about noise, those other, just try to see if there's another way to police this first. So that's what that meeting is about, is really about police. And I'm helping facilitate that because I've been involved, but that's really what the meeting is. So it's been an invite to the Paramount HOA and a couple of their representatives that we've had as points of contact. And my understanding is they're letting the whole neighborhood know. But again, I don't know how many people, Paramount's a big subdivision, but I don't know if all of them really care that much or how many of them care. So, but all are welcome.
Okay, I was just curious if it would be of interest to hear what during the January 30th meeting, so one or more of us may have a heads up of what we may anticipate at our February meeting.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, and Mr. Baird obviously is sitting right there, if you all were a decision-making body or had more Wade, if you will, or probably, yeah, I would probably advise you against attending those meetings, gathering information outside of your process. But I mean, that's just my take, and that's why I mentioned Ted's. I mean, if you're the Planning and Zoning Commission, don't go to it. But you really don't. Again, I guess I'd leave that open, and if Ted has other advice and advises you not to go, I could kind of see that too. But in this case,
Mr. Chair, I think the purpose for which you intend to go is fine under these circumstances. My only concern is that if there's going to be a quorum of you there, then do we have to notice a meeting? I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So
Maybe I just wait for the memo then.
Well, it certainly, if you don't go, certainly touch base with Caleb and get an idea for what their concerns are and
Okay.
be able to be prepared for that meeting when they come to see you.
I'll give it some thought, and it was just an opportunity to listen, and, okay, very good.
just one
Thank
more
you,
thing.
Mr.
I'm not
Chair.
trying to belabor this, but again,
Appreciate it.
the difference between January 30th and February 4th is not much time. So don't expect a whole lot of follow-up in your packet for your Monday meeting, because
Okay.
this is one business day before that.
All right,
And I need to get your packet out to you. So your packet is coming out about the same time this meeting is happening. But I will try to verbally provide everybody an update, and what I can, I'll maybe try to do a quick synopsis in your packet, but it's not going to be probably overly developed.
very good. Thank you, Mr. Hood. Okay, we have completed item 6E. That closes all items in 6. Future meeting topics, Paramount Parking, okay, we've kind of covered that. 2019 priorities. Mr. Lewis, you did a lot of homework last time on those 5-year plans, so is it fair to expect a comparable effort to?
I will try.
Very good, sir. No, that was, you did a very good job on that. Thank you. Linder Village project update. Master Mobility Map, Comprehensive Plan update. Mr. Hood, maybe too early, but we left it at our last meeting for those that have on the transportation component. You think there may be one more meeting, or?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I do think there will be one more meeting. What I plan on doing at this point for those of you that have been participating on the comprehensive plan focus group with transportation, we've developed some concepts for some of those discussion areas that we've talked about. So Northwest Meridian, Southwest Meridian, Magic View, Woodbridge area. What I'd like to do at this point is share those concepts with you all electronically and just see if you have any comments on them. We're fine-tuning those with our consultants right now in anticipation of some stakeholder meetings that will be held Monday, February 11th and Tuesday, February 12th. The February 11th meeting will be up at Willow Creek Elementary School, which is up, it's Everest Lane, Chinden, Linder area there. And then the one on the 12th will be here with the Woodbridge, Magic View homeowners here in Converse maybe. But let me share those concepts with you all in the coming days. We're going to talk about it at the steering committee meeting. So Mr. Lewis will be there hopefully on this Wednesday night. We're going to kind of refine those concepts, and then I'll get those out to everybody on that focus group hopefully by the end of the week. I do want to I'll just mention it, although I don't have an exact date yet. We do need to circle back on the master mobility map portion of that, though. That can probably wait, though, till a little bit later in the spring. So I will call that 4th meeting, but we're thinking maybe February, but I think we've got enough from the housing group and the economic development group of some of these concepts that we're okay moving forward. But I will need your attention and participation in March, April, somewhere in there to see if there's any legs there with that master mobility map concept that we briefly have talked about.
Very good. Any, do we want to make any additions to future meeting topics? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 8. Our next meeting is February 4, 2019. Mr. McKinney, you may want to loosen your arm. I have a court appearance in Mountain Home at 1:30. Depending on how far the hearing goes, I may or may not be here until somewhere into the meeting. So I'll have to ask for an absence, if I may. Judge has a little priority of where my presence should be. So our next meeting is February 4 at 3:30. As always, I leave it open if there's anything else that has come to mind that we ought to take up. Now's the time. Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, if I just want to quickly give everybody a heads up. So I got some training this last week from the city clerk, and your packet's going to look a little bit different going forward. I'm going to be putting together the packet the same way they do city council agendas and meeting packets. So if you're familiar with those at all, it'll largely look the same and it'll contain the same information, but there's going to be a cover sheet on most of these things. So it's going to have some very high level information, and honestly, I probably won't use some of it, like estimated time or presenting person. I mean, I'll try to fill some of it out. That's probably the biggest thing you'll notice is there's going to be this cover sheet for all of the things before each agenda item. So it's going to be an automated packet now. So I'll upload each individual section, and it basically combines all those things and runs a report, and there'll be hyperlinks. So it'll be kind of cool. You probably won't get the PDF version of it anymore. It'll look just like your agenda, and then on the agenda, it'll have a hyperlink to that item in the packet. So just wanted to make you aware it's a little bit different fit and feel, same information largely, just a little bit different format.
Very good. Next item would be to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We're out of here. Okay. See you on the 4th, depending on if the judge lets me return. Thank you. I just reminded myself of that as we were going on. David?